the tech giants get involved. Caught in the crossfire were international tech companies. American cybersecurity firm Red Core was accused of helping the Israeli military develop counter-jamming AI tools. A Chinese-owned cloud service used by Iranian banks was mysteriously deactivated, suspected sabotage or back-channel cooperation. Even Telegram, a lifeline for activists in both countries, faced accusations of bias as accounts were banned or manipulated. The United Nations issued warnings about violations of the Geneva Convention in cyberspace. But cyberspace has no borders and no rules. What began as a direct war between Iran and Israel quickly morphed into a regional emergency and a global political crisis. As cities burned and skies darkened, the world found itself pulled into a conflict no one could ignore. The United States, caught between a lie and avoidance. The United States, Israel's strongest ally, found itself walking a tightrope. President Robert C. Maddox, under pressure from both Congress and NATO, authorized the deployment of 2 carrier strike groups to the eastern Mediterranean. USS Gerald R. Ford and USS Dwight D. Eisenhower took position off the coasts of Lebanon and Syria. U.S. bases in Qatar, Bahrain, and Jordan were put on high alert, but direct involvement remained off the table for now. President Maddox addressed the nation. We will defend our allies, but we will not plunge the world into another war. We seek peace, but are prepared for escalation. American forces in Iraq were attacked twice by PMF militants. The U.S. responded with limited airstrikes, but avoided strikes inside Iranian territory, fearing a wider war. The European Union and NATO called an emergency summit in Brussels. France and Germany urged restraint, sending humanitarian aid to Lebanon and Jordan. The UK offered radar and intelligence support to Israel, but stopped short of sending troops. Poland and Estonia called for increased NATO presence in the Mediterranean. Protests erupted across Europe, some supporting Israel, others condemning the war. In Paris, clashes broke out between pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli demonstrators. Cities like Berlin, Madrid, and Brussels saw widespread calls for an immediate ceasefire. China and Russia, power plays. China, reliant on Iranian oil, urged an immediate ceasefire. It offered to host peace talks in Shanghai and sent a delegation to Tehran. But behind closed doors, it also ramped up all imports through backdoor barter deals to bypass sanctions. Russia, weakened by its ongoing conflict in Eastern Europe, stayed largely silent but not idle. Russian mercenaries were spotted near Damascus, allegedly protecting Iranian assets. Moscow vetoed a UN Security Council resolution that proposed a demilitarized zone in southern Syria, calling it unilateral interference. The humanitarian crisis. The war had displaced over 1.6 million people by early February. Jordan received over 150,000 refugees. From Lebanon and Syria, the Gaza Strip's population plunged into a humanitarian disaster. No power, no clean water, and dwindling medical supplies. The Red Crescent and Doctors Without Borders reported dozens of field medics killed in crossfire. Nations around the world launched donation drives, but many aid trucks never made it, blocked at borders, bombed en route, or looted. This was no longer just Iran and Israel. It was the Middle East unraveling in real time. With death tolls rising and economies crumbling, the world pushed for diplomacy, but it was a race against time. Would leaders find a way to end the violence? Or was the region headed for all-out war? Secret talks in neutral grounds. By mid-February 2025, secret back-channel negotiations had begun. Oman hosted indirect talks between Israeli and Iranian envoys. Switzerland organized an intelligence-sharing channel for hostage exchanges. Qatar offered to broker a limited ceasefire in southern Lebanon and Gaza. Leaked documents revealed that both countries had quietly shared casualty figures and red lines. Through European mediators, Israel demanded full IRGC withdrawal from Syria and cessation of rocket fire from Hezbollah. Iran demanded an end to airstrikes on its soil and Gaza. Ceasefire drafts and disappointments. The UN circulated a 6-point peace draft. 1. Immediate cessation of hostilities. 2. Creation of demilitarized zones in Lebanon and Syria. 3. Return of UN peacekeepers to Golan Heights. 4. Humanitarian corridors for civilians. 5. Prisoner exchange through Red Cross. 6. Independent investigation of alleged war crimes. Iran rejected the draft, calling it biased and colonial. Israel criticized it for failing to address Hezbollah and Hamas's role. A second draft, written by Turkey and endorsed by Russia and China, proposed a new Security Council task force, but was vetoed by the U.S. Meanwhile, the war raged on. The voices of the people. Despite the political gridlock, ordinary citizens called for peace. In Tel Aviv, a peace march drew over 50,000 people. In Tehran, videos emerged of families hanging white sheets from windows as a sign of truce. In Lebanon, Christian and Muslim clerics joined hands, issuing a joint statement. This is not our war. International pressure mounted. The Vatican, African Union, ASEAN, and even Pope Francis urged both sides to accept mediation. But the leaders remained locked in the calculus of military advantage, the shadow of nuclear fears. As tensions grew, the unspoken fear hung heavy: nuclear escalation. Iran had begun moving enriched uranium to undisclosed sites. Israel, long suspected of nuclear capabilities, held military exercises involving the submarine fleet. A single miscalculation could plunge the world into a catastrophe not seen since Hiroshima. Every war has a moment when the world pauses, when headlines shift from grim updates to a single, horrifying question. Is this the day everything ends? For the Iran-Israel war, that moment came on March 2, 2025, a day historians would later call Black Sky Sunday. The Shahed 149. At 4:13 a.m. local time, Iranian forces launched a Shahed 149 hypersonic missile from a base near Kerman. It was aimed not at a battlefield, but at Dimona, the heart of Israel's nuclear facility in the Negev desert. The missile traveled at Mach 7, making interception nearly impossible. Israel's early warning radar lit up, and panic spread across the country. Moments before impact, Israel activated its Arrow 3 interceptor system. In an event broadcast live on encrypted defense feeds, the missile was destroyed mid-air, shattering across the sky in what many described as a second sunrise. But the threat was clear. Iran had crossed every red line. Israel's cabinet convened in a secure underground bunker. Reports suggested that nuclear readiness protocols were activated. A Dolphin-class submarine was seen surfacing in the Arabian Sea, its presence both a warning and a message. Israel was prepared to escalate. In Washington, the Pentagon went on DEFCON 3 for the first time since 2001. U.S. bases in Jordan, Kuwait, and Bahrain were put on alert. President Maddox made a rare unscheduled appearance in the White House briefing room. His message was short, deliberate, and chilling. We will not allow a nuclear confrontation in the Middle East. If either side escalates to weapons of mass destruction, America will respond accordingly with full force. That evening, a U.S. Navy destroyer intercepted a second Iranian missile bound for an Israeli oil refinery. This act was viewed as America's first direct military action in the war. As the world focused on Dimona, chaos unfolded elsewhere. In Lebanon, Hezbollah launched its deadliest attack yet, targeting an Israeli convoy with anti-tank missiles, killing 22 soldiers. In Syria, a Russian contractor outpost was mistakenly hit by an Israeli drone, prompting a diplomatic firestorm with Moscow. In Tehran, thousands rallied in Azadi Square, chanting, "Total war, no retreat." Back in Israel, military aircraft flew low over Tel Aviv. As rumors swirled of a preemptive nuclear strike, supermarkets were emptied, gas stations ran dry. In cities across the world, embassies were evacuated. Everyone was preparing for the worst. But something extraordinary happened behind the scenes. A Swiss diplomat, known only as Ambassador, coordinated a covert Zoom call. Yes, a Zoom call between Iranian and Israeli intelligence chiefs. Neither leader spoke directly, But both sides acknowledged one critical fact: escalation would destroy them both. Hours later, Oman, Qatar, and the Vatican issued a joint statement proposing an immediate 72-hour truce, a last chance at peace. Remarkably, both sides agreed. The world, battered and bruised, exhaled, if only for a moment. As the dust settled, the future stood at a crossroads. The war had killed over 21,000 people, displaced nearly 4 million, and cost the region more than $180 billion. Had the Dimona missile struck, or had Israel retaliated with a nuclear weapon, the Middle East would likely have collapsed into chaos. Egypt and Jordan might have joined the war under public pressure. Saudi Arabia could have mobilized to protect Sunni allies. Turkey, suspicious and ambitious, might have intervened in Syria or Iraq. This scenario outlined in UN risk documents was avoided narrowly, but the threat lingers, hanging over every ceasefire negotiation like a guillotine. The more likely outcome: a frozen battlefield. Hezbollah and Hamas remain armed, but partially restrained. Israel maintains high alert status indefinitely. Iran rebuilds, slowly, under heavy sanctions and international scrutiny. Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon continue to suffer under the weight of proxy violence. This is the new normal, a constant state of readiness, of suspicion, of preparing for the next war before this one is truly over. For the first time in years, Israeli and Iranian civilians publicly spoke of each other's suffering. Viral videos emerged of Israeli doctors treating Lebanese children, of Iranian engineers helping Syrian refugees rebuild bombed schools. In an interview, a grieving mother from Tel Aviv said, "I don't want revenge. I want to plant flowers where my daughter died." In Tehran, a father who lost 2 sons whispered to a Western reporter, "What did we gain? I have to photos, not children. Tell them we don't want war." Small things, but peace often begins that way. After the 72-hour truce, negotiations slowly resumed. Qatar proposed a demilitarized corridor in southern Lebanon. Switzerland offered to host nuclear disarmament talks. The African Union began crafting a reconciliation commission, modeled on South Africa's post-apartheid truth and reconciliation model. Most ambitious of all was a people-to-people diplomacy movement, virtual dialogues, student exchanges, shared cultural festivals between Iranians, Israelis, and diasporas worldwide. Whether these seeds grow or are buried in fresh blood is still unknown. Iranian women, who once protested mandatory hijabs, now protest mandatory war. Israeli youth, once eager for military glory, now march for peace and mental health services. Arab Christians, Druze, Jews, and Muslims form peace caravans across the region, crossing barriers no government dared to breach. These voices are small, but no longer silent. The Iran-Israel war of 2025 may be ending, or it may only be on pause. History does not turn with certainty, it creaks, bends, and sometimes shatters. What remains are the lessons. That power does not make peace. That survival is not the same as living. That security must be mutual, or it means nothing at all.